we identify things once the brain knows what we are seeing. So if you know who these people are, then only you will identify them. The gentleman on the left hand side of the screen is Röntgen, and the gentleman on the right hand side is Sir Godfrey Hounsfield. One being the father of X-rays and the one being the father of modern day CT scans. So these two are the ones because of whom we are actually able to discuss the X-rays in the previous topic and the CT scan in my topic. In today's day and age, what we do is basically a helical or a volumetric CT. The advantage of this particular pattern is that it allows for a continuous scanning where an X-ray beam runs parallel in relation to the patient. So it usually remains unaffected by the depth of respiration. So you are able to detect the pulmonary nodule, malformations and airway abnormalities in a greater detail without having to spend too much of time in scanning. This is a very important line in terms of a critical care is concerned. Your patients are sick, you get them down to the CT scan room, you need the CT scan to be done as fast as possible and you ship them back to the ICU environment. But there are a lot of terms which are used. When you come in your day-to-day life, you have got a non-contrast CT, you've got an HRCT, you've got a CCT or a CT pulmonary angio. What is the fundamental principle which is different between the two or among all the terms? A standard CT scan is what will give you the slide spacing at 10 mm intervals, and an HRCT would give you a 1 to 2 mm interval of slide spacing. What it means for you, where do you order an HRCT, where do you order a normal CT, I'll talk in the subsequent slides. So the concept is at 1 to 2 mm slice, when we do it at 10 mm intervals, the HRCT is not scanning your entire lung. It is actually scanning a certain percentage of the entire lung. So if anybody could guess, the amount of lung scanned on a HRCT is, it is only 10 to 20% of the entire lung is scanned while doing an HRCT. And an NCCT actually gives you the entire overview of the entire lung, right from the lung apex to the base. That is the reason you have to decide whether you have to order an HRCT or an NCCT depending on case-to-case basis. Not every patient needs an HRCT. Hounsfield unit. Hounsfield unit, why it becomes important? Just without going into too much of details, a standard 0 Hounsfield unit is reserved for water, -1000 for air and +1000 for a cortical bone. So anything which falls between -1000 to 1000, that is the way you define what. Suppose if you see a mass lesion, suppose if you see a pneumonia, suppose if you see a nodule, if you're able to identify the Hounsfield unit given to you by the radiologist, you can think in terms of whether it's an active nodule, whether it's a dead nodule. For example, a calcified nodule will carry a higher Hounsfield unit. So what are the guidelines for a CT scan? And in what cases would you ask for a contrast CT scan? A contrast CT scan is usually asked when you're looking for vascular problems. For example, pulmonary embolism, pulmonary nodular amyloidosis, tumor identification, traumatic cases, pleural pathologies. These are the main indications where you're looking to do a CT scan with a contrast. Suppose if you have a patient for a COPD, where you have to just identify the lung parenchyma, you do not need a contrast. So you do not need to order a CT scan with contrast. For example, you have to do a pulmonary nodule on follow-up. You do not need a contrast. For ILD patients, you just need an HRCT scan because it will give you the greater details of the interstitial lung disease. You do not need a contrast for that. For bronchiectasis, HRCT at present is considered the gold standard for bronchiectasis diagnosis and management, apart from one indication, where the patient of bronchiectasis presents to you with hemoptysis. Any hemoptysis, any vascular problem, you always look for a contrast. So what are the indications for an HRCT? The full form being the high resolution CT scan. Mainly the diffuse interstitial lung disease, emphysema, COPD, bronchiectasis. So in general, when you have to look into the internal architecture of the lung. So a broad difference between the two, you help anything where the slice thickness is 5 to 10 mm is a normal CT scan, and when the slice thickness is less than 2 mm or preferably 1 to 2 mm, that is an HRCT scan. Look at the amount of difference in the images, what you see in these two images. The same patient, same location, what you see on the left is a conventional CT scan and what you see on the right is an HRCT. So the amount of difference what you see, do not get misled by every dots and lines what you see on an HRCT, everything is not abnormal. Normal lines would become so much enhanced on an HRCT, so you have to train your eyes in such a way that you identify normal versus abnormal. Yeah. So now this is a diagrammatic representation of what I am trying to explain you. What is the difference between a HRCT and a regular CT? Let me just move it further. For example, if you have got two patients with lung shadows and both the patients have got a upper lobe nodule, either you decide whether you have to do for a conventional CT or an HRCT. So you look at the detailing, what difference would it make? When you do a regular CT, as I told you, the regular CT scan takes cuts at 10 mm interval. So it will keep taking cuts throughout the lung, and possibly one of the cut will definitely traverse through the nodule as well. And the biggest part about this conventional CT is something different, that once you are done with the whole scanning, it superimposes the remaining area on the next cut. So the whole lung is technically scanned. Whereas on a HRCT scan, wherever you take the cut, only that particular cut is given to you as a report or on the film. You do not get the intervening area. So you tend to miss that part. So suppose if you are suspecting a nodule in a right upper lobe and you order an HRCT, so you have to make sure that you order HRCT of the lung with right upper lobe abnormality. Then the radiologist would focus on the right upper lobe and take the maximum cuts in the right upper lobe. Now, sorry, let me just go back. Yeah. So when I come to the HRCT of the same patient, this is the way cuts are taken. Possibly your particular cut would miss the nodule and your scanning report might not show the nodule at all, what is seen on a X-ray, because the remaining lung parenchyma is not superimposed on the cut which has been taken. So that is the entire idea. So when you do a HRCT, you have to look for architecture, fibrosis, emphysema, nothing else. For all other, like obviously bronchiectasis, everything else can be done with a regular CT scan. So when you order a contrast CT, the main indications are pulmonary embolism, aortic dissection, aortic overloading, pulmonary tumors, pulmonary hypertension, any pleural involvement where you have to differentiate or enhance the pleura away from the lung. That is the idea. So by having this basic knowledge, whether we are dealing with a CT of normal conventional CT scan or a HRCT, let's move into the radiological anatomy of the chest. In all practical purposes, I will talk to you about two windows, that is the lung window and the mediastinal window. There are actually three windows: lung window, mediastinal window and bone window. Bone window is mainly reserved for fractures, bone tumors or any bony involvement, but we do not need to discuss too much about the bone window. If we concentrate about these two windows, we have solved our purpose. So let's start with the mediastinum. Always train your eyes in understanding the mediastinum at these 6 levels. Whenever you look at a CT scan, do not randomly look at a CT scan. Remember these 6 levels which I've given it to you, so that you know what particular structure comes on that particular level. So the level 1 is called the aortic branch level, level 2 is aortic arch level, level 3 being aortopulmonary window level, level 4 is left pulmonary artery level, level 5 is right pulmonary artery level, then comes your cardiac level with 4 chamber level and 3 chamber level. Because whenever the patient is lying down in a CT scan machine, you are actually scanning the patient from superior to inferior. So this is the way you go about it. So from top, you go to the bottom. So these are the levels where you scan a lung. Always this key has been given to you in every CT scan film. So first level, that is the aortic branch level. If you look at the CT scan at this level, you will see these structures. When you start identifying by the levels, you will never go wrong in any identification. Before I move further, anything what you see on the left side of a CT scan is the right lung, and what you see on the right side of the CT scan is the left lung. So train your eyes in such a way. So first identify the right lung, left lung. So right brachiocephalic vein, then comes all the three aortic branches: brachiocephalic artery, left common carotid, and left subclavian. So these three are the aortic branches, what you see at the aortic branch level. In the center, the round structure is obviously the trachea, and a small structure what you see posterior to the trachea is what? It is the esophagus. So what you see at this level is only these structures: brachiocephalic artery, left common carotid, left subclavian. Then you come down. Now you are not going to see the branches, you are going to see the aortic arch. Aortic arch is moving from the right to left. Why? Because it starts from the left ventricle, takes a turn and goes down. So that is the way it moves. So at the aortic arch level, what you see on top is the SVC. Then you see the main aortic arch. And obviously the trachea is visible along with the two lungs. We are not going to comment on the lungs on a mediastinal window. Then comes the aortopulmonary window level. That means you have moved down from the arch. SVC is still visible. Now it is divided into ascending aorta, descending aorta, and obviously the pulmonary artery. And you see the trachea is getting divided into right and left. The carina is about to be approached. Then you come to the left pulmonary artery level. At the left pulmonary artery level, you obviously see the ascending and the descending aorta, and you see the truncus arteriosus along with the left pulmonary artery. So once you see the left pulmonary artery, these are the structures visible at this level. Then when you move down even further, then you see the right pulmonary artery level. This level is very, very important at a critical care setting because of identification of pulmonary hypertension as well as pulmonary embolisms. I'll be showing you a few slides about that. So keep this particular level definitely in your mind, the right pulmonary artery level. Usually the measurement of the right pulmonary artery is smaller than the correspondingly visible aorta. If this levels change, you start thinking in terms of pulmonary hypertension. So ascending aorta, descending aorta, right pulmonary artery. Then comes your cardiac level. At cardiac level, you've got again two levels. The first is the 4-chamber level. You have to identify these chambers also on a CT scan because any abnormality will be only identified once you know what is normal. It starts from the right atrium, right ventricle, left atrium. That is the way you identify all the 4 chambers of the heart at this level. Then when you come down at the last level, you only see a 3-chamber level. That means you only see the right ventricle, left ventricle, and the left atrium. The right atrium is not visible anymore. Along with that, you also start seeing the IVC. So all these levels are very, very important in terms of identification of the mediastinum. So aortic branch level, aortic arch level, aortopulmonary window level, left pulmonary artery, right pulmonary artery, and cardiac level. Moving ahead, we come on to the lung window. On the lung window, we have almost similar levels, but we have lesser levels. We have only 4 levels. We do not have the aortic branch level and we do not have the further ventricular levels. We only have aortic arch level, left pulmonary artery, right pulmonary artery, and cardiac ventricular level. So before I start telling you about this, it is my duty to explain you or we all have read about it. Most of us have forgotten, apart, because we do not use them on everyday, day-to-day practice. The bronchopulmonary segments. We all know the right lung has got three lobes: upper lobe, middle lobe, lower lobe. The left lung has got two lobes: upper lobe, which is divided into upper lobe proper and lingula, and the lower lobe. But we should also know the bronchopulmonary segments. Why? Because that makes you aware about exactly where the pathology is lying. You are not going to fool around simply by saying it could be here, could be there. So right upper lobe has got three segments: apical, posterior, anterior. Middle lobe has got two segments: medial, lateral. The lower lobe has got five segments: apical, medial, anterior, lateral, posterior. You can easily read about it. Then comes your left side. Left side you have got upper lobe, which is divided into upper lobe. The apico-posterior is fused into one segment. Then anterior segment. Then comes your lingula, where in lingula you do not have medial and lateral. You have got superior and inferior lingula. Then you have got the lower lobe. Only important point to remember in the left lower lobe is the medial basal segment is missing. So you have got four segments, that is anterior, lateral, posterior. You do not have a medial segment apart from apicobasal. So apicobasal, anterior, lateral, posterior. You do not have a medial basal. So when we come to the aortic arch level, so whenever you see a CT scan and you see that you are able to see the aortic arch in the center, so that means at this level, what are the segments visible to you? On the right lung, you see anterior segment, apical segment in the center, and then posterior segment behind. And on the left lung, you see anterior in the front and apico-posterior behind. So at this level, this is the way the bronchopulmonary segments are visible. This is the way you see at the aortic arch level. I'll be taking you through some exercises to identify structures in a particular segment. So once you start training yourself every day on this, you will never go wrong on a CT scan identification. Then you move down. You start seeing the left pulmonary artery. Corresponding to the left pulmonary artery, now you start seeing the anterior segment becomes larger, apical segment shrinks to a small segment, posterior segment, and then you start seeing the superior segment of the lower lobe. The middle lobe has still not come because you are scanning the lung from top to bottom. The middle lobe is still to come, but the lower lobe comes before the middle lobe. That is the anatomy. And on the left side, you see the anterior segment, apico-posterior segment, superior lingular segment, and the superior basal segment of the lower lobe. So this is the way you you do the division of the left pulmonary artery level. Then you come to the right pulmonary artery level, where you see the right pulmonary artery is visible. Corresponding to that, you only see the anterior segment of the upper lobe. The posterior is already gone, apical is already gone. So now you start seeing the medial segment of the middle lobe along with the superior segment of the lower lobe. And on the left side, you see superior lingula, inferior lingula, and the superior basal. So identifying this structure will again give you the findings. Suppose if you have a mass, if you have a pneumonia, so you know which segment the particular pneumonia or a mass is there. Cardiac ventricular level. At cardiac ventricular level, you are only left, the upper lobe is completely gone. So you are left with the medial and the lateral segment of the middle lobe and all the segments of the lower lobe, anterior basal, lateral basal, posterior basal, and a very, very small medial basal. Similarly, on the left side, you see the inferior lingula. Along with that, you see anterior medial, lateral, and posterior basal. Why the inferior lingula and the medial basal segment? Why the inferior lingula and the medial segment of the middle lobe is important? Because these two segments are going to cause the saluting of the cardiac border if there is a problem on the X-ray. For example, if you see a problem which is saluting the right cardiac border, that means the problem is in the middle lobe, likely in the medial segment of the middle lobe. It is not in the lower lobe. Similarly, if the problem is saluting the left cardiac border, you have to think the problem is in the lingula. So, moving ahead from this, keep in your mind all these levels: aortic arch, left pulmonary artery, right pulmonary artery, and the cardiac ventricular level. So whenever you have this all in your background, you start approaching a CT scan. And whenever you approach a CT scan, first you look at the overall appearance of a CT scan, then you identify the problem, look at the location of the problem, the distribution of the problem, and any additional findings you have. Few important signs which could be important in general, more important in terms of your critical care experience. Atelectasis collapse. Very frequently used terms. Everybody nods their head, yes, there is a collapse. Everybody will say, yes, there is atelectasis, but what are these? Whenever there is volume loss, whenever there is partial volume loss, it is atelectasis. When there is a complete volume loss, it is a collapse. Difference between a direct collapse and an indirect collapse. Direct collapse is when the bronchus is occluded. Very likely reason for a bronchus occlusion in an ICU setup is a mucus plug, or it could be a mass, or it could be any foreign body. Now, passive collapse means if you have got effusion, and effusion is causing compression of the lobes, it will still cause a collapse, but a bronchoscopy would not help a passive collapse. A bronchoscopy is recommended in an active collapse. You can obviously go back and read about the radiological signs of collapse. Direct signs and indirect signs. These are very, very important. Frequently asked in exams in terms of whenever you are put up a radiology, they will ask you direct signs of collapse and indirect signs of collapse. I am not going into the details, but basic understanding is the particular fissure which is connected to that particular lobe or a segment would start moving in that direction towards the ipsilateral side. That is leading to the displacement of the interlobar fissure, and the bronchovascular markings become crowded. The indirect signs are the mediastinal shift to the ipsilateral side, the elevation of diaphragm, higher elevation, and compensatory hyperinflation of the spared lobes or the spared lung. So, coming further, do not use the word consolidation and collapse interchangeably. A consolidation is not collapse. You can have a very large pneumonia and the bronchus is completely patent and visible. So that means this particular patient is having an infective pneumonia or any pneumonia, but there is no mucus plug inside. What you see on the screen in the left upper side is a large pneumonia in the right upper lobe with proper air bronchogram sign. When you come down, you see a round shadow with a center spared and all around it is a ring shadow. It is called a reverse halo sign. Reverse halo sign is a very common finding, usually found in invasive fungal infections or in cryptogenic organizing pneumonia. Then on the right side, on the lower side, you see a halo sign. Halo sign means the center is dense and surrounding is on ground glass. Very likely reason for a fungal infection. And on top, you see multiple areas of consolidation or nodules, very likely referred as a bronchopneumonia. Then comes finger in glove sign, typically representing dilated bronchus with mucus plugs, most commonly found in bronchiectasis. Vascular problems. You see pulmonary embolisms, pulmonary hypertension. What you see on the top left side, you see the right pulmonary artery level, you see there is a hypodense shadow inside the pulmonary artery. That is a typical saddle embolism. And what you see on the right side of the screen, you see the pulmonary artery is more wider as compared to the corresponding ascending aorta or descending aorta. Very likely sign of a pulmonary hypertension. Then comes Hampton's hump or melting sign or a Westermarck sign. That means these are again radiological signs which we have all read of embolism. Whenever there is an embolism, it cuts off the perfusion of a particular segment. So that particular segment will have this pleural based kind of a lesion, and once it starts improving by your treatment, it will melt from the pleura towards the center. And that particular area where, because the perfusion has been cut, it will lead to oligemia of that particular lobe or the segment. That is called the Westermarck sign. Knuckle sign is again a sign when there is a organized thrombus inside the vessel. Now, moving from the vasculature, we move to solids. What could be solid? It could be masses, could be nodes, could be nodules. On the upper left side of the screen, you see a round lesion, typically called as a solitary pulmonary nodule. any nodule or any shadow which is less than 3 centimeter in size, not associated with any lymph nodes, not associated with any pleural reaction, is a solitary pulmonary nodule. Then you can have masses. Anything which is bigger than 3 centimeter is referred as a mass lesion. What you see on the screen on the right upper side are the mediastinal nodes. For example, the left paratracheal node, right paratracheal node. Down you see large masses involving the right lung. So you have to start identifying and training your eyes whether I'm dealing with a mass, whether I'm dealing with a node, whether I'm dealing with a nodule. Then a very important slide in terms of ICU is ARDS. ARDS can be a cardiogenic ARDS versus a non-cardiogenic ARDS. A typical picture of a cardiogenic ARDS is where you have got opacities which are bilateral, symmetrical, bat wing shaped, associated with cardiomegaly and bilateral effusion. It is very likely suggestive of overload. These are the patients where you need decongestion or you involve the cardiologist for the management. But a typical pattern of an infective or a non-cardiogenic ARDS is where the shadows are basal, they are heavy, and these are the patients where they will benefit from proning. And when you prone these patients, the shadows start moving and the lower collapsed areas or the lower atelectatic areas, they start opening up. This is a typical picture of something called a non-cardiogenic ARDS. Now when you look at these, you will also come across in your practice whether it is an empyema, whether it is a lung abscess. How do you identify that? Very sharp eyes can easily identify them, but few hints and points. An abscess will make an acute angle with the chest wall, and anything which is in the pleural collection will make an obtuse angle with the chest wall. Although it's not true always, but it is something which you can keep in your mind. For example, what you see down is a typical lentiform opacity which is making a D-shaped profile, the convexity towards the hilum. That is called a pregnant woman profile. Typical pattern of a encysted effusion or an empyema. And what you see on the right side is a opacity which is making an acute angle towards the pleura. It is a typical pattern of a lung abscess. Pneumo or a bulla. That means this is a dilemma because the management is completely opposite. If you put a chest tube in a pneumothorax, patient will drastically improve. If you put a chest tube in a bulla, you might end up creating more complications. Bulla is a parenchymal problem. Pneumothorax is a pleural problem. So a pneumothorax is the one which is going to collapse the lung towards the hilum, and the lung is usually concave towards the hilum. Whenever it is convex towards the hilum, it is usually a bulla. So identifying a pneumo from a bulla is important whenever you have to take a decision. A very important sign in terms of the patient who are on ventilator, sometimes you do not see a classical pneumothorax, but train your eyes when you do an X-ray and you see a shadow which is going down like a rat tail below a costophrenic angle. This is called a deep sulcus sign. Deep sulcus sign is typically a pattern of a early pneumothorax happening. Possibly it could be iatrogenic, or it could be ventilatory induced, or it could be a disease process per se. But identifying this pneumothorax will make a huge lot of difference in terms of your management. So this patient done with a CT scan showed a pneumothorax on the right side. So what do? You ask for a chest tube insertion. Make sure the chest tube has to be inserted by somebody who is good at inserting a chest tube, because it looks easy, it can create havocs. Look at this picture. The patient got a chest tube insertion because they saw a deep sulcus sign, and the chest tube has pierced through the liver and caused furthermore aggravating the problems. This patient had a pneumothorax which could have easily been managed. Only difference was the chest tube was required to be placed in a higher position. Called a lung sign. You get patients of trauma where you have a road traffic accident, patient coming to you, you have intubated the patient, patient is not improving. Whatever you have done, you put in a chest tube, still the patient is not improving. You see the lung has fallen down. That's a typical sign of something like a fractured bronchus, where the bronchus has completely given way. This patient needs an urgent CTVS or a thoracic surgery intervention where the bronchus has to be repaired. Do whatever, this patient will not improve with any kind of a chest tube. A continuous diaphragm sign. On an X-ray, sometimes you don't see anything. You just see the two diaphragms are kissing each other. A typical sign of a mediastinal emphysema. In a mediastinum, you can see masses. For example, on the left upper screen, you see a large mass in the posterior mediastinum. It is a typical collection or a mass in the esophagus. Then you see a opacity in the anterior mediastinum. The anterior mediastinum opacity can have got varied diagnoses, right from thymoma, teratoma, thyroid, lot of differentials can be possible. Lymphoma is a very, very common differential of an anterior mediastinal mass. Then you look at the pericardium. If you see a large amount of hyperdensity surrounding your cardiac chambers, it is the pericardial effusion. And if you see the ascending aorta has got a line in the middle of the division, or a descending aorta will show the line, that is a typical pattern of an aortic dissection. So I'll be almost ending my presentation by a few of the slides. What sign is seen in this particular X-ray? You see the opacity is merging with the right heart border. So basically it is causing solute of the right heart border. That means the problem is in the lower lobe or the middle lobe. The problem is actually in the middle lobe. So the sign depicted here is the solute sign, and the problem is in the middle lobe. At the same time, a CT scan was showing a proper at the cardiac ventricular level. When a CT scan is taken, you see opacity which is saluting the cardiac border is called the solute sign. The medial segment of the right middle lobe. Now, looking at this particular X-ray, this is a particular X-ray taken at a particular level. So at this level, what opacity are you seeing and what fissure is limiting the spread? So this fissure is dividing the upper lobe and the lower lobe. So any fissure which divides the upper lobe and the middle lobe is the oblique fissure. And the opacity is limited in the lower lobe at the right pulmonary artery level. That means there is a pneumonia in the superior segment of the lower lobe. Why these things are important? Because if you ask your pulmonologist or you do yourself a bronchoscopy, your yield will increase only when you target that particular segment. You simply go and take a sample from any random segment, your yield will be much lower. You see this opacity. You see at the level of, you see there is a right upper lobe, you see opacity, and there is a sign which is classical sign depicted here. This patient has come to you with a massive or a large hemoptysis. This is a typical pattern of somebody coming with a air crescent sign. That is an aspergilloma. Aspergilloma can create a large volume hemoptysis, and when it moves inside the particular cavity, it will cause frictional hemoptysis. So this particular patient had anterior segment of the right upper lobe involved because it was taken at the left pulmonary artery level. This opacity, very easy. It is taken at the highest level of a parenchyma. Opacity right in the center. There is a large cavity right in the center of the right lung. So aortic arch level, opacity in the center. So that means it is the apical segment of the right upper lobe. Again, you see a large opacity, limited, but it is a dense opacity. Where could this opacity be? This is the CT scan taken at the right pulmonary artery level. So at the right pulmonary artery level, at this corresponding level, you only see the anterior segment. So the anterior segment of the right upper lobe is involved. Similarly, you see this opacity, cardiac ventricular level, saluting the cardiac border, which is the segment which could be involved. Inferior lingular segment of the left upper lobe. This opacity, where you see even the air bronchograms seen into the opacity, it is placed at the cardiac ventricular level. It is lying in the posterior segment. So it is the lateral basal or the posterior basal segment So between the two, you can always be confused. But yes, it is the lateral or the posterior basal segment of the right lower lobe. Similarly, you see large area of bronchiectasis involving completely the right upper lobe. So anterior segment of the right upper lobe. Subtle areas involved at the aortic arch level, anterior segment of the right upper lobe. So similarly, you can keep going on, and you can have to practice every day. Whenever you go back from here, keep picking up CT scans, look at the level, and then start identifying the pathologies. This is my last slide. You cannot end a CT scan slide without talking about the CORAD scoring. Now, with God's grace, we are kind of out of these COVID issues, but we all have to be trained, and possibly for PGs, you will definitely be asked in your exam the CORAD scoring. So make sure you read about the CORADs 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You only know that the abnormalities can be varied. You just need to know patchy ground glass opacities, peripheral based, not central based, very high abnormality, very high suspicion towards COVID. CORAD 5 is typical pattern of COVID, and there is nothing called CORAD 6. It is CORAD 5 with PCR positive, nothing else. Thank you so much. We can discuss a lot about CT scan, but I wanted to limit to this so that it gives you an overview. How do you approach a CT scan and identify? You have to practice every day the mediastinal structures, parenchymal structures, so you identify each and everything day by day. Thank you so much.